Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Empowerment Summit. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today we are going to be talking with Patrick Martin. Patrick is a licensed clinical social worker with over a decade in the field, certified in cognitive behavioral therapy. He is passionate about helping others improve their quality of life and created a video, podcast, blog, and company called the Mental Health Toolbox. I love that name, to educate others on effective strategies for personal development. Patrick is most passionate about strategies on interpersonal effectiveness and helping others overcome their social anxiety and realize their full potential. He is currently working on building a suite of online courses to meet the needs of his audience. Patrick's personal interests are wellness, personal development, productivity, and what he enjoys the most is spending time with his wife and two daughters. Like, that is awesome. I can see why you would enjoy that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you. My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on, and doing this summit is doing a wonderful service to the public. And it's my honor and privilege to participate in that.
You know, Patrick, I tell everyone when I first introduce our speaker that, like, when I put the word out, I wanted to do a mental health empowerment summit to help remove some of the myths, start getting the conversation open around mental health. And I reached out to some of these amazing people like yourself, and not one of them even hesitated like yourself. They just said, yeah, how can I support you?
Absolutely.
And they've shown up, and it's been like, I am so proud of this summit and this series. So thank you for being one of those people who always shows up. Like, I just appreciate it.
Oh, I'm just, whatever value I can add. That's why this is my passion project, and I'm happy to help.
Well, one of the things I've been asking all of the speakers when they first come on is, what does mental health even mean to you? What does that look like? I mean, everyone said something completely different, which I love, because I want you guys to all know that none of them are wrong. Everyone has a different approach onto what mental health looks like.
Well, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, having not had any formal experience in mental health before becoming a therapist. Funny enough, I wasn't in therapy as a kid, although I probably should have been. Mental health to me means knowing how to support yourself and love yourself and seek compassion and personal growth and create a life of meaning, a quality of life that's meaningful to you in spite of circumstances. And knowing how to figure out what it is you want, how to ask for it of yourself and others without judgment.
I think that's a really good perspective around mental health. I know that, like, I love that you have something called the Mental Health Toolbox. And you guys, this is a place, like, one of the reasons I was really glad Patrick came is he has a podcast. He has tons of resources. So if maybe you're a little too nervous or embarrassed or shy or not even sure how to start, tapping into getting help or questions answered, that's a really good place to start. One of the first things I want to start talking to you about is social anxiety, because that happens a lot more than you think. Like, people don't know it about me, but I am definitely an introvert, but yet I'm speaking all the time. But if you put me in a crowd of people, totally different person.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It is a lot more prevalent than I think people realize. And even for myself, oftentimes I'm maybe the one in a staff meeting to raise my hand, or my friend had a birthday party for her 15-year-old daughter the other day, and I got up and made a speech, and people make a big deal out of that as though it's like something easy for me, but it's really not. It's actually quite the opposite. I grew up in a very unorthodox kind of environment. I was on the road a lot. For those who know me, I never stepped foot in a public school until college. And so I was on the road. I grew up in a motorhome. So I was all over California. Didn't really get my roots in anywhere for quite some time until my teens. And so even at my very first job at 18 years old, I was very timid, withdrawn, introverted. And I'm laid back to begin with, but it was different in terms of self-esteem, confidence, being able to speak up. And I think I'm comfortable with that more now because I've learned how to just take action and not get in my own way.
Well, I was really excited to have you on as a speaker because I knew we were going to talk a little bit about social anxiety. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how COVID's actually affecting that, and especially in our youth. Like you said, you grew up definitely different than the norm for us anyways. You weren't always around kids. You weren't were you doing sports, stuff like that? Or so that's kind of what's happening these past 2 years is our kids have been pulled. um, isolated, and now they're going back out, but they're taking all those anxieties with them.
Absolutely. And I'm already seeing, even just among friends and family, the repercussions, the after effects of being reintegrated, right?
Mhm.
Almost like somebody's been incarcerated, tries to get back into society and be, and participate. There's almost this delayed reaction, of overwhelm, overstimulation, overwhelm, demand, structure, all of that. And so, yeah, if ever there was a time to talk about uh, self-care, mindfulness, managing our anxiety, it's now, for sure, for adults and children alike.
So that kind of leads me into my next question for you about where does social anxiety come from? Because I'm kind of wanting to know in the next decade, these beautiful children that are growing up with through the COVID years,
Mhm.
what is that going to look like from them later as that ripple effect? Because social anxiety usually comes from something when we're younger, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely. I think of the term early roots,
Mhm.
late fruits, right? And that's just how I try and remember that correlation, is because a lot of how we understand the world, how we relate to the world, is in our formative years, right? That 0 to 6 and then 6 to 13, and those two developmental phases, right? And a lot of that comes from our interactions with our primary caregivers, no surprise in common sense, right? You would think. But it's a lot of the subtleties, actually. It's how we learn to resolve conflict. It's how we're allowed to express our feelings, if we're allowed to make mistakes, right? It's those families of origin, and they don't necessarily need to be nuclear families by any means, but structure, consistency, validation, those things are crucial. And if we don't have those pillars in our development that allow us to grow into understanding the world and taking risks in a safe way and being able to experiment a lot and not have repercussions from that, to be allowed to fail and learn and try again, to express ourselves. If we don't have those things, then it creates a lot of kind of psychic tension, being very afraid to take risks. And that doesn't, a lot of that doesn't show up until later on. Or if it's activated, like a lot of those core assumptions of the self, the negative self-esteem, self-doubt, self-criticism, a lot of that you won't see it manifest until it's challenged. And that could be in school through bullying, right? It could be a lot of sudden expectations that maybe you were very sheltered as a kid, and then you're kind of thrown into the deep end, right? It can show up in a lot of different ways. But almost always, at least in my experience, what the research shows, comes from inconsistent households where there's not a lot of validation going on, not a lot of encouragement, and then even sometimes more so, a lot of criticism, negative feedback, right?
I agree. I think that one of the examples I always talk about for everyone who's an adult or past 2 years old, basically, is one of the things that we first learned is walking, right? But we failed,
Mm-hmm.
we failed, we failed, we fell. I remember parents going, "Oh my gosh, they just missed the corner of the table when they fell with their head,"
Mm-hmm.
And yet, what did people do, like parents do, when their child fell? We looked and "Oh, you did it. Get up. You're
That's right.
okay."
That unconditional positive regard, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And yet now what are all of us? We're expert walkers. We get up, we do it, we don't even think about it because it's just the way it is. But what if that was that way for everything we failed at, right? Oh, you tried. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, look at what you did. What did you learn? Like
Yeah.
next time, try it this way.
Reminds me of a quote I used to have on the fridge when my daughter was like 2, and it said, and was to help me remember, don't teach what not to do, teach what to do. Right. So you're focused on what someone we did, what your kid didn't do well. Focus on what was successful and go back to the drawing board and try again. Right.
So changing those don'ts to coulds, that's
Hmm.
amazing. I love
Absolutely.
that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about why, like we're pretty smart decade right now, right? We learned a lot about health and wellness, moving forward, self-care, but yet we still have a lot of social anxiety going on. And what do you think keeps that going?
Yeah. So we think of these as perpetuating factors, right? What keeps stirring the pot in spite of all of this awareness, right? All of the resources and tools we have at our disposal, the there's more focus on counseling in schools for children and getting them the care they need. It's a work in progress. But a lot of what keeps anxiety going for children and adults alike, especially young adults, or are their fears being validated? I think about if you think about how anxiety is rooted, it's rooted in lived experience or limited experience. If a child has very few friends or tries to make friends in school and they get bullied or made fun of and they're afraid to try again, that's a very limited frame of reference, right? So even into adulthood, and you see this for children who learn to withdraw and not take risks, as they grow into adults and they have to take risks in order to become, functional members of society and have a quality of life, get a job, go to school, that kind of thing, then there's a lot less likelihood they're going to take socially acceptable risks in order to make those things happen, right? It's that whole idea of nothing ventured, nothing gained. But what will perpetuate anxiety is if they lack the freedom, the internal freedom to take chances and risks. Oftentimes they'll take very few and they'll be very selective. So they'll either sit on their hands until all the ducks are lined up and all the stars are lined up, and then they have a pretty much guaranteed success if they do take a chance, which is few and far between. And then that just reinforces that whole notion that things have to be, it's because I waited for things to be perfect that this succeeded, as opposed to in spite of things not being perfect. So that's one thing. Another part of it is take risks, but you lack the social skills to navigate a situation, and then there's fallout that reinforces the assumption. See, I knew this would happen. All of those automatic negative thoughts that fuel anxiety, we call those schemas or core assumptions, core beliefs about the self or how the world works. Whether that's self-labeling, I'm stupid, I'm not smart enough, I'm not fun enough, I'm not pretty enough. Whatever we believe about ourselves that fuel that anxiety, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy unless someone learns to both correct the thought process and learn the social skills. It's kind of a two-pronged, almost three-pronged approach in order to break that cycle. But yeah, so it's a lot of things, but it's almost always lived experiences reinforcing fear, fearful outcomes.
Since I'm a firm believer that I do believe we pick up a lot of our anxieties and behavioral patterns from those two phases of youth, as being a caregiver to youth, how do we change that? How do we recognize what's happening, allow them that space, and help be part of that process? By the way, we are never going to get it completely right. That's just not what we're supposed to do, right? So don't think you failed, because all you can do is do better the next time, right? Which is the whole point of, I don't call it failure, I call it feedback, getting the feedback from maybe the first thing that didn't work so well. I know I raised 4 children and not one of them were the same. I treated every single one of them differently because they all had different needs in the way they were developing. And I try to recognize them as individuals and not just as a child. And it was definitely challenging growing up with raising 4 children. But with the bullying, the things going on at school, that's big in their heads. For us, we know you'll get over it because we've been bullied at some point and got over it. But for them, that's their whole world. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating. It causes fear and anxiety around what's going on. What are some of the things that we can do to help recognize and start creating that change in those informative years?
Yeah, I think of that phrase more as caught than taught oftentimes. So one is definitely modeling how we deal with stress. Right. And I don't think anybody would raise their hand and say, oh, I'd love to go back to middle school and relive that part of my life. No, no, thank you. Right. But what we can do is, since we have the benefit of hindsight's more 2020 than not, what we can do is validate, normalize their experiences, be a safe person to come to as a sounding board. Right. A lot of children are afraid if they share what's going on, even if they know how to express themselves, how they're going to be received. if I say something and then my parent, the bells and whistles start going off and they ask me 20 questions and they get emotional and heated up about it, then that can be very off-putting. That can make the child feel like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have shared this. Even if there's not direct negative feedback, if there's a lot of high intensity, a lot of energy coming back at them, it can be overstimulating for them and they may not know what to do with that. So I think being approachable is a huge aspect we should work on as parents or as caregivers, is being approachable, asking open-ended questions, eliciting feedback, showing unique interest in the person. Like you said, no kid is the same. Every kid has their own interests, and not comparing, obviously, children to other children, but definitely normalizing the struggles of development, and that no feeling is forever, right? But life is a sandbox, right? Nothing's set in stone, right? And or an etch a sketch, whatever makes sense to a kid to help them understand that things aren't permanent. And that's oftentimes where anxiety comes from. They're afraid that because I said this, or that I messed up over here or over there, then it's set in stone and I'm always going to be looked at in a negative way by my friends, my peers, and helping them understand that, these things are fleeting and what they're experiencing is normal. And what is important is to instill a sense of adaptability, right? Because a big mistake a lot of children and adults make is to think that confidence means you always get it right or you always know what to do. It's not. It's about being courageous and not getting too attached to outcomes. I try and tell this to my daughter, my teenager, don't get so caught up in your expectations because you can't control those so much. It's good to have an idea of how you want things to play out, but all we have control is of our actions, right? And then hope that things work out in our favor, but it's okay if they don't.
I know you're raising two beautiful, amazing daughters, and mine are all grown, raising kids of their own now. And if I could do one thing over, and I hope everyone hears this, it would be a better listener. Because when my kids came to me, I might hear what's being said and process it really quick with a million other things. I got to do the wash, got to get stuff for lunch, got to run to the store for this. And I miss so much of what they were really saying to me. So if you could even take 10 minutes out of, I don't know, twice a week, 3 times a week, where you go in to a quiet space, walk into your kids' room. How's it going this week? I just want to touch base with you and be complete. I call it intuitive listening. I'm watching their body language. Are they making eye contact with me? I know my kid better than anyone in the world. I know when something's really not right, and giving them that space to talk to you where you're really listening. I know it's hard raising 4 kids. I'm telling you, I was very bad at that. And I look back now, I'm telling you, when my grandkids call me, that's my do-over. And when they call me, the world ceased to exist. I'm looking them directly in the eye and I'm listening really hard to everything they're telling me, even if it's silly, stupid 5-year-old stuff. They know they've got my attention.
That's so powerful. So powerful. And especially because being available, being present, and here's the funny thing with kids, right? Teenagers, you can try and be present or engage them, and they may not be in a headspace where they want to, but you're planting seeds. Right. But when they do come to you, it is very important, absolutely, to just press pause, drop everything, and be fully present with them. And if you can't communicate that. Oh, wow, it sounds like you had something really interesting happen at school. Right now, I'm just finishing up this thing. It'll take me 5 minutes. How about I come and, we'll sit and talk about it. And children need to know what to expect, because if they come to you and you're not available, even though in your head, you're thinking, oh, I'll come back to them in 5 or 10 minutes. If you're not communicating that, then it feels dismissive. And so, yeah, absolutely. Making those small things make a big difference in terms of being present, right? It's the same thing we try and teach adults, right? When they're trying to connect with other people or make friends. It reminds me of that old Dale Carnegie book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, right? It goes a long way if you just show a genuine interest in somebody else's interests.
I love those tips. The next thing I want to talk to you is about how do we secure and maintain those healthy relationships Honestly, I think as human beings, we all have the need to fit in, to be loved, to create a little community of our own and be accepted. But how do we secure and maintain all those healthy relationships?
Right. It's hashtag do all the things, right? It's almost impossible to stay on top of everything and every relationship. Um, I would say definitely being mindful, quality over quantity, right? And being, again, kind of like we talked about with kids, like any relationship, learning to be present for the, people that we do have in our circle, and making it a point to reach out. And the nice thing is that when there is some consistency, there's not a need to feel like you have to hash, everything over. What's going on with me? What's going on with you? If you have some semi-frequent, touch points with the people that are important to you, it goes a lot further because you already have that line of communication open. They're already warm, right? And so that's why I think of it. It's not like you can't be at the same intensity with everybody all the time. It's impossible. Same thing with your goals, right? You can't invest. There's no such thing as complete balance. We have all these plates spinning, be those relationships, people, responsibilities. We can't always be lean into the same things all the time, but we can keep those plates spinning by kind of being aware and mindful of what's maybe being a little neglected and what's a priority, and then figuring out how to toggle between them based on what's important, and just checking in with ourselves and saying, is this relationship being neglected or not? And how can I show up and be of service to that person? How can I show genuine interest in what's going on in their lives? And this could look different in person than maybe social media, right? Maybe on Instagram, instead of sending or a text, or even on a phone, instead of sending a text, I try and make it a point to send a video message. How hard is that? Or a voice message. There's something we lose in text about our intonation and our tone and our sincerity, right? A text doesn't mean nearly as much as maybe an audio message or a video message. And taking the extra effort to put in a little more work to be present with somebody, even if it's over, a phone. So
I think that was beautifully said. And I agree with you 100% that whenever we can really show up for someone in a voice or a text, or not a text, but a voice message or a video, that's just so much more powerful than just putting a little text out to them. So for me, that really is something I try to do all the time. I want to talk about everyone that's come has overcome as far as the expert speakers we've invited in, and you're no different than anyone else. You overcame and you have this great free offer for everyone. You want to tell them a little bit about it?
yeah, absolutely. So I have a little workbook on overcoming social anxiety or anxiety in general. It's about 7 worksheets. If you want to grab that, I'm more than happy to give it to you. I have some other freebies as well. But if you want to jump onto my email list, you can get access to that. Be more than happy. I keep adding to the resources. If there's anything in particular you feel like you would benefit from in the realm of anxiety or another area of mental health and personal development, feel free to just let me know. You can reach out to me at my website or social media, and I'll be more than happy to, add that to the queue of things I'm trying to create for anybody who's interested. But definitely, I have a handout on social anxiety, and it's a workbook of seven sheets you can go through. And all I have to do is sign up to my email list, and it'll be right there for you to grab.
Patrick, thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate you. You guys, we're going to put all of Patrick's links in the bottom, including the link to the free gift and his podcast. So if you need another resource, go listen, tune in, leave him some comments, let him know what you want to hear about or what you might be struggling with. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.